Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Digicel Business Masterclass series and the launch of our mentorship program. Yup, you heard me right. Do I have your attention? I'm your host, Terri-Karelle. It's always a pleasure having you tune in. So let us talk about this mentorship program. Let's talk about the what and the how. So Digicel Business, in association with the JMEA, will be selecting 12 entrepreneurs to be in a mentorship session one-on-one for 1 hour with top business leaders. Those that have been here on the Digicel Business Masterclass stage, as well as others that we have identified. So now I know you're asking, Terri-Karelle, so how are we going to do it? Well, head on over to digicelbusiness.com and I want you to do 2 things. You must be registered for the Digicel Business Masterclass series, the On Webinar Jam. But then there's also an application form that you must fill out and submit. You also need to make sure that you follow the Digicel Business page on LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, go and create your account and get to it. Now, applications will close off December 10. I wish you all the best. This is an opportunity that you do not want to miss. Now, as usual, we love your participation. We welcome your questions. So make sure that you submit your questions using the hashtag Digicel Masterclass, hashtag Digicel Business. Over the past few weeks, we have learned about building your brand, business strategies, digital transformation, having a relationship with your money. And we also learned about developing a success mindset. So the question is, well, what can we speak about that is relevant and is timely? Let us talk about productivity, work-life balance, and does it even exist? Especially in today with all that's happening and having to come up with new ways of not just working, but coping. Can it be done? Well, we have a master in class today for you, and comes in the form of Mr. Marcus Steele, former CEO of Carreras Limited and Director of Proven Wealth Limited. He was also recognized as the 2014 top CEO in Jamaica by Business Suite magazine. Now, you might be asking, so what makes him what makes him the master? Well, apart from being an influential executive, he's a fitness enthusiast, a father of 2, always seen doing many other things, including philanthropy. So we believe he's the perfect master for this topic. So get your notepads, get your paper, your pencil, because the class is now in session. Welcome to the show.
Thank
How
you very much.
you?
I am doing fantastic, Terri.
Great to see you.
My
The last time I saw you, you were handing out millions of dollars of worth in terms of scholarships and grants to students within the tertiary institutions, from Edna to CMU, UTech, and UE. How important, as we just mentioned, the mentorship program, how important is it as a leader, as an entrepreneur, to pay it forward?
No, it's very important. We have to invest in the future, and the future of this country, and we have to invest in our human resources. And when I was the CEO of Carreras, we spent quite a bit of resources because we had a pillar that we refer to as empowerment through education. And I think that is important. So what we decided to do then was to invest in our youth. And we have a lot of struggling families.
Right.
I mean, we had a lot of students coming to us. They're very brilliant.
Had the talent,
but they can't afford to finish. So that was where we decided to close the gap. And that is something I believe that a lot of companies should continue to do. And, I lift my hat to Carreras for that.
Fantastic. And of course, thank you so very much for offering your time, because you are definitely one of our mentors in the one-on-one session. So I know that a lot of persons, or the lucky entrepreneur, I should say, will benefit from that one-on-one session. So let's talk about productivity, especially someone like yourself who is expected to be very productive and to yield, great results, high performance, but then you have all of these other facets. So let me ask you, before we even dive into the questions, what does productivity look like or feel like to you?
And it's a very good question, because a lot of people would think that productivity means that you work very hard and you work very long hours. And but for me, I don't define productivity like that. It's really what you focus on, what is important to you, and what you pay attention to, what somehow create value to you as a company and also as an individual. So you spend a lot of time putting resources into those things and then measure the output of that. So if it means that you want to study, for example, someone studying, is how do you utilize that 1 hour of study time that you have? If you have a meeting, how do you utilize that 2 hours or that 1 hour of meeting time that you have? So you focus primarily on what matters, what is important. Yes, a lot of times as a CEO, I will pass and see my workers, my employees sitting at their desk working, and that feels good. But what is important is what have you achieved? And is it in line with the goals, either your personal goal or the goals of the company?
Great answer. I heard, or I might have seen it somewhere last week, where someone said that we are infatuated with the idea of always being busy.
Yes.
Looking busy, seeming busy, telling people that we're busy, when rather what we should be doing is doing the right things and being productive by doing the right things in the right period of time. So would you think that that's a better...
Yes. I think you captured that very well, Terry, because sometimes we spend a lot of time doing the wrong thing, and we don't get the results that we expect. But if you, and I've seen it, I mean, this is the mantra, this is how, as leaders, as CEOs, we have to pay attention to ensuring that we as CEOs create the environment, because that's another thing too. It's all good and well to say, listen, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, we hire you to do this. But if you do not create that environment where it is engaging, yes, then the productivity will not be there. And there is a direct link between the engagement index within an organization and the productivity index. There is a direct link to that. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that.
Well, it's so simple yet so profound. And we have a lot of different viewers from different parts of not just Jamaica, but the region. And as new entrepreneurs or those that are veterans, a lot of the times we do not use that data.
Right.
We may hear it, or sometimes we have the data, but we do not turn it into smart data to really look and analyze and assess the areas that are possibly weak in order to get those areas, nice and productive.
That's correct.
So everyone's talking about this work-life balance. And we have to admit that, in not just 2020, but as we get older, everything gets faster. We're multitasking. We're doing 3 million things. Everything seems to be of the same priority level. And we're expected to be the masters in all facets of our life. So when we speak about work-life balance, do you think it even exists, or is it an impractical expectation?
I've listened to, thank you, I've listened to the debates, and I've had a lot of debates on this very same topic about work-life balance. And you're right, it doesn't really exist. In my view, it does.
Okay.
But this is how you have to look at it. You have to, as an employee, you have to turn up for work. And what do I mean by turning up for work? It doesn't mean the physical presence. So your mental state, your physical health, yes, the knowledge and experience that that are required for executing the job, you have to have all of that together to be able to create that balance. But there are a lot of things on the periphery that working either for that or against it. So for example, if you're leaving your home and your family is happy, you're sending your kids to school, your finances are great, you are going to turn up to work. And then at work, if the environment is as such, where the culture is engaging, where you are rewarded for great work, where the tools are there for you to deliver, then you can be very productive. But what is important?
Sounds lovely. It sounds like
what is important?
Oh my gosh, sounds good.
It sounds good, but it is possible. It is possible, because what is important is for the organization to see it as part of their DNA, and that comes from the leadership. So the leadership has to walk the talk. So, for example, I believe that the whole concept of work-life balance is not it's not something the HR department comes up with. It is part of the overarching support to the strategic direction of the company. Because remember, human beings, we're all human beings, we're emotive beings, we have feelings, we have emotions.
Absolutely.
And we don't leave them at the gate and pick them up when we depart.
Correct.
It doesn't work like that. So we have to find a way to connect those and be in touch with our employees. And that is very important. So it works. Now, it's important that as a part of the objectives of the company, we have the whole concept of work-life balance. So we have to invest in health and fitness. We have to ensure that our employees are okay, they have the right environment to work. They're able to have fun working, because a part of delivering and being productive is to have the passion and the drive to deliver great and fantastic results.
And to keep that stimulation.
Exactly, and you have to be part of that buy-in. And for that to happen, you have to be credible. They have to trust you.
Yes.
Yes. You have to be credible. You have to walk the talk. Yes. And you have to show them that it is part of the overarching objective of the company. So it is possible, but it requires work and it requires focus. No, I must say it's not necessarily one of the first things that sometimes when you have revenue challenges, when you have profit challenges and cash flows and all of these other things, that maybe not be the first thing that comes to mind. But guess what? We need to ensure that it is, because at the end of the day, we need those employees to deliver. And for them to deliver, they have to turn up.
Fantastic. Now, you spoke from the standpoint, of course, of the business,
yes,
the company, creating that environment and trying to encourage having that positive work-life balance. Now, on the part of the employee or the individual, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different personal struggles, and we all have our targets that we need to meet at the office. With everything that's going on, what do you think are secret weapons, or is there a secret sauce for individuals trying to achieve or attain this work-life balance? Do you think that there are a couple of pointers that they should at least try to tick off in order to achieve it?
Well, I don't believe there is a secret sauce. If I had that, I'd be a billionaire. I would be able to sell that and make a lot of money. However, there are some things that you can do. Focus on self. I've always said that. It is very important that as an individual, you focus on yourself. So you focus on making a better you. Yes, I do have my motto that I said, my today's best should be my tomorrow's worst. And what do I mean by that? Is that I ensure that I'm a better Marcus tomorrow. And when I talk about being a better Marcus, I'm not talking necessarily about money, but a better person. So a couple of things that I would encourage in focusing on self is that focus on positive energy. For example, I do not entertain negative energy. You know, there's a lot of it out there, and you have to navigate them. Yes, I do not focus on negative energy. And what do I mean by that? If you have challenges, we have to resolve them. But it doesn't make sense you start focusing on all the negative around it. It's trying to say, how do I get out of this?
Correct.
And you seek those alternatives and those solutions. So that's the first thing. The second thing is focus on your health. I was 250 pounds, you know.
I can't even believe that. I'm what?
I was 250 pounds. And now I'm 180 pounds. I moved from a waist of 40 to 32. And it is because I started to focus on self. And I realized that when I was 250 pounds, whilst I was still turning up at work, I was having my own personal struggle. And I had to deal with that. And I can tell you, from I got rid of those extra pounds, I recognize that I'm a lot more confident about self, yes, and that is important because it helps to build your self-confidence, yeah? So if we focus on self, another thing that I suggest that, I read a lot. So I get up in the morning, and I get up at 5 o'clock, and I read, and after I read, I do my morning run, and I come back, and I read again. So find something that you enjoy doing. Yes, no, whilst I'm running in the morning, I am defining what is important for me for the day.
You're setting the tone for the day.
Absolutely. So by the time I'm finished my 2.6K run in the morning, by the time I'm finished, I know the top 5 things that I'll be focusing on. So you see the link between focusing on self and being productive, because those are the things that I will be focusing on throughout the day, whether it is in my personal life or whether it is in my professional life. So, and run your own race. I mean, don't run anybody's race. That is very important. Sometimes we like to do that. We look over there.
And we try to keep up with the next person who's
run
moving
your
at a
own
different
ways.
pace.
And if you aim to be better than you were yesterday, you are going to reach places. And that is what is important.
Let me ask you a question. A big part of, for example, finding work-life balance for me, whatever my balance looks like, is learning to say no.
Yes.
Understanding that people-pleasing, at some point in time, you get stretched very thinly.
Yes.
And a lot of persons don't know how to disappoint and how to say, I'm so sorry, I have a lot on my plate and I have to say no.
Yes.
Are employees allowed to tell their bosses, hey, and I guess it goes back to creating this culture, right?
Yes.
But we're really asking the question. There's some employers who have unrealistic expectations of their employees. You have some employees who are doing 1 million jobs that really should have been broken out. Do you think that employees should be able to say, hey, I really want to make these targets, I really want to make these goals, but to balance this out, my mental health, my mental state, my performance, I got to tell you no. Is that a good idea or is that a bad idea?
Listen, it's a good question. When you're part of a high-performance culture, the culture of delivering significant results,
yes,
you are going to be faced with situations like that. However, again, it is how all of that is managed. The organization needs to ensure that they create the environment where employees feel that they can say, I don't want to say no, but
an alternative.
Yes,
it's
bring a different alternative that may achieve the same result, but in a different way.
Got you.
So if you just don't focus primarily on this is the way I want you to do it. So one of the things that a part of my leadership style is to throw out objectives to my employees and allow them to come up with solutions, because they are part of their sociogram, the way they interact with each other. I may not be part of that.
Correct.
But they know how, with their colleagues, to get things done.
And how to get things done.
Absolutely. And something that was part of my time at Career is that we talk and we live the principle of freedom through responsibility. So we set the objectives, we give you some clear value guidelines, because we have to operate within the corporate and values of the company.
And that's understandable.
And we said, you go ahead and deliver within those guidelines, but you have space to decide and to flex. And if you do that, you'll find that one employee feels more comfortable and more confident. They are not afraid to make mistakes, so they're more bold with their suggestions and solutions. And you create the learning environment where people learn from their mistakes. If you have that, I think your productivity is going to go way high. Yes, because you're going to achieve quite a bit through those exact same employees.
All right, great answer. Let's talk about COVID-19.
Yes.
How has it redefined work-life balance?
Let me tell you, it has. And I know, prior to the pandemic, a lot of companies were a little hesitant. So the whole thing about work-life balance was sometimes a moot discussion. But now we are forced, yes, whether we like it or not, we are forced to work from home.
Yes.
Now that has a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and we have to manage those. Because one of the things that we have to be very careful about is that we're the blurring of the lines at home. Yes. When work starts and when your family focus starts.
The boundaries.
And the bosses and leaders and managers have to understand that dynamic, because if not, you're not going to achieve the desired results. So what the pandemic has done is you have brought home work.
Yes.
So your home space now becomes your workspace. When does that start and when does it stop? Now, employees, and this is why it's important, you have to focus a lot on the culture of the organization. Because as an employee, if I receive an email at 11 p.m. in the night, I should be able to ignore it and don't feel that my boss thinks that I'm ignoring it. 11 p.m. is family time. is my time. So I think there has to be that conversation around that. So I think we need to define the boundaries. And that is very important. If not, you are going to have family issues and family, issues that will impact productivity as well.
Of course.
The digital footprint at the home may not be ideal. The whole issue of confidentiality, because things that you're privy to at work now,
correct.
It's now at home.
The accessibility to information.
Absolutely, and and organizations will feel a little, uncomfortable, not be able to control that space. So there's a lot more that we need to learn with this, and believe we are learning as we go along.
Correct.
To be honest, because we were forced into this with the pandemic. But again, I think that it can work. We have to communicate more, a lot more. We don't have our fellow employees there with us. So sometimes it's not physical. Yes, exactly. So therefore, the digital footprint, the communication footprint, it has to be working well for that to work. But I think, I've seen some progress, but I've also heard some horror stories. And I think that we just have to make sure that, again, we come to the word balance. We have to strike that balance between the two.
I believe that there's someone, I think, because our chat is going on, persons are going to be asking questions and they're chatting.
Yes.
Someone has a resume and they're very ready to submit it to you because they want to work for you wherever it is you are. And I certainly hope that we'll get to see a question from that person so that I can put you guys face to face. But you did mention boundaries. And I think that is so important. And you mentioned the fact that because persons are working at home now, there is this sense of, well, I can reach out to you at any time and you can answer my emails at any time. And I guess it goes back to what you're saying about leaders, making sure that they have to structure and create that space that persons know, hey, I don't expect you to answer after a certain time. I just sent this email, but we have the boundaries. Fantastic. So when should we draw the line on work or life activities in order to stay on balance? Like at what point do we look for red flags where we know, okay, we're in a danger zone and we need to draw this line? Yes.
When you find that the employees, they're complaining more, they are reporting, that they are not feeling well. You're not hitting the targets. You're missing the deadlines. You call a meeting and they have nothing to say. Because that's another thing. When you call a meeting and they have nothing to say, they have a lot to say. Yes?
Take notes. Please take notes. I mean, even the camera guys are like, yep. If
they have a lot to say. So you have to be in touch emotionally and connecting with the organization to be able to read those.
Taking the cues.
Yes, taking the cues. And this is why it is very important that I take it all the way back to the leadership of the organization, because we have to lead from the front on this fight. We can't just push it out there and leave the employees to either sink or swim. It's not going to work. Because we still have to deliver value to our shareholders as managers. So you have to find, HR has to be listening a lot more, and the organization has to be more receptive towards persons bringing, their challenges to the table, and not just hearing them, but put things in place. Because again, it's all about credibility and integrity.
Right.
You have to be credible in front of the organization. And I can tell you, a happy employee, an engaged employee is going to deliver for you, even without your asking. But you have to, find those cues, you have to address them, and you have to communicate.
Absolutely. Should we work hard, work smart, or do both?
We have to work hard, but smarter. Yes, and so it's both. To be honest, I'd rather you work 4 hours and deliver the result than 8 hours. to deliver the same result because you're being much more productive.
I appreciate that. You know what? I absolutely appreciate it. It is something that I have seen. I've been a manager at different companies, and one of the biggest takeaways or the biggest observations that I've always noticed, especially not just in Jamaica but in the region, is that there is this idea that if I don't see you at your desk, if I don't look over you and see you from your 8 to 5, then it means you can't be productive or that you're not being productive, as opposed to this kind of mentality where it's, listen, this is your target, make your target, and if you do it in 2 hours or 4 hours, if you do it remotely at a co-work space or at your office, it is fine by me. Why are we so hard on that?
It's cultural, I think. I think it's something we have inherited in the work culture for years. There are some roles, obviously, you have to clock in and clock out. You know, if you're operating a machine, I mean, you need sometimes to be physically there. But I think we have evolved as a workforce into areas where you can set the objectives.
Yes.
And allow freedom. And again, I go back to that. Freedom through responsibility. You allow the employees the freedom to deliver, put levers of control in place to ensure that you're not surprised. Because one of the things as a CEO, I hate to be surprised. But I do, I like pleasure.
Understandable.
The good surprises, yes, but
the bad
ones, not really. So what I tend to do is to put levers of control in place. So I have to have the confidence. There's a saying, you know, we don't hire, and I'm not calling out any employees a dog, but we don't hire a dog to bark and bark. So I'm not going to hire you and do the work for you, this principle. So I'm going to allow you to work. I'm going to ensure that we create a culture where you can get the buying into the strategy. So you understand exactly what to do.
And you become invested in the process.
Absolutely. Then I give you the freedom to go ahead and do it. And you only scream when you need help. But if you say that we're going to deliver next week, I expect you to deliver next week. Now, I'm not going to necessarily follow up whether you were at work at 8 o'clock and leave at 5. That's irrelevant for me. What is important is that the strategy is being delivered and your input into that, creating the output, is there within the time frame that is given. And I think, but again, you have to have an organization where trust is important, because you have to trust that the employees will be able to do that.
And as you mentioned earlier, it's a part of the culture, and so it takes a while to even break into the persons who are at the top, the executives, and having everyone kind of think and feel and operate in this particular manner.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But it's leadership from the top, you know, because one thing, I mean, I can tell the culture of an organization is determined by the leadership.
Yes.
So if it's coming from the top and it's credible, believe it or not, it's going to resonate right through the organization.
100%. I just want to remind you guys, if you have any questions, reminding you that the topic is productivity and balance, that work-life balance that we always hear about. I mean, if you're experiencing something, you want to ask your question, feel free. We're happy to hear from you. Make sure that you use the hashtag Digicel Masterclass, hashtag Digicel Business. So we're going to continue speaking about this. You know, what are your recommendations for structuring an approach to work-life balance, especially for those who are at home? We rightfully spoke about the fact that some people have children at home. Some people's homes are not big and spacious. We have multiple persons. We have spouse. The space is cramped for a lot of persons. They're trying to keep their sanity. They're trying to meet their expectations as parents, as homemakers, and of course as employees or as bosses, depending on what their position is like. What recommendations do you have even for them, you know, during this time to restructure? Are there things that they can possibly do or change around or implement that will help them?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the home, most of us, our homes were not set up to be the workplace. So let's start there. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to have a communication. We have to have a let's talk with our family and say, this is our new reality. You know, so you have to bring your husband or your partner, whoever, your kids on board and say, this is our new reality, yes, and get their buy-in. And you have and now you need to set boundaries. So
From within.
From within. So even before you extend the conversation on boundaries to your employers, you have to do it from within. So your son or your daughter, or your husband or your wife need to know that at 8 o'clock, between 8 and 4, this is work time. Although you're physically seeing me, but I'm not available.
Pretend I'm not even here.
Yes, so you have to set that. Another thing, and what will help too, is if you create a small space, no matter how small it is, and this is work. So whenever I'm in that space, it sends the signal that I'm not at home, figuratively, right? So you do that. And again, if you have the communication and communication is key for me in all of this, yes, because that will help to curb behaviors,
right?
Yes, around you.
And it leaves no room for assumption or misunderstanding as well.
That is correct. And have the hard conversation, because sometimes it's going to be a hard conversation. When you have your young child wanting mommy or daddy, mommy or daddy not available,
right?
At this moment, yes? So you're going to have the hard conversation. And I think if we define those limits and boundaries through conversations and buying before and proactively, though, not when there's a problem. But then I think that should help a lot. And as I said, create a space, a physical space.
And it's interesting what you said a while ago, because I think it comes back to structure and routine.
Yes.
And if structure and routine becomes a part of your work-life balance, when crises hit, even though you're going to feel it because we're natural, we're humans, because you have that structure, you had that communication, you had all of those pillars that were already set up within,
right.
It is easier for a family to stick together and work together when it has always been a part of their DNA.
Absolutely.
Versus
Absolutely.
they're not being structured before and now it's crisis and it becomes much harder.
Absolutely.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see business owners, whether this is locally or across the region, what are the biggest mistakes you see business owners and professionals making with regards to productivity?
Well, the first thing is confusing in what is urgent versus what is important. Because sometimes a sense of urgency is a self-made problem. So you procrastinate, and then when the time is on you, then it becomes urgent.
Yes.
And you force and you pressure the employees to get things done, and they crack this or snap under that. And believe it or not, under that situation, you're not going to be productive.
Correct. So
we need to clearly define what is important. And now, important tends to have a very a medium to a longer term value connotation to it. Yes? So the strategy is important. We're going to deliver earnings growth over the next 5 years.
Right.
That is important. However, we need to break that down into smaller things. Yes, and the smaller things, yes, if you understand what that line of sight is, then you put the resources in place so that they don't become urgent.
Correct.
Yes, so if we can clearly define that.
So sometimes we self-sabotage. Sometimes we
without even knowing it, we tend to do that. Another thing that I can say in answer to that question is avoiding difficult conversations. We need to have conversation, and not all conversation will
comfortable.
be not all. And sometimes we try not to have the difficult one and end up in problems. So again, but again, you have to create a culture for that.
Correct.
So people to feel comfortable. So if I'm having a problem, I don't want to suffer in silence, because you're going to be unproductive if you do that. You should be able to raise your hand. You should be able to scream and get help without feeling that you're being judged.
Correct.
Yes, you have to create that.
Or that you might lose your job for speaking out or for having an opinion. Absolutely.
Haste make waste. Yep. And that's why you have to plan from the beginning. So sometimes, and as CEOs, we have a lot on our plates, and sometimes things fall through the cracks, and then suddenly it becomes urgent, and we try to get it done. And at the end of the day, did we really get the true value from the value chain? No. So again, proper planning, but you can't overplan either.
Right,
yes?
And you certainly can't predict
yes,
based on what 2020 has shown.
That is absolutely correct. But it's better to have a plan than not to have anything at all,
Correct.
to be able to respond, you'll be able to respond to something. So that is important. Another thing, meetings.
Oh,
Sometimes we have meetings, and
Marcus,
and we become
mash up,
unproductive
pull back on.
in the meetings. And some people judge productivity of a meeting based on the length of the meeting. And that is not true. I have been in meetings that lasted 3 and 5 hours that could have lasted 30 minutes if we just focus. So one of the things that we need to have clear definition and objective as to why we are meeting and ensure that the persons in the room are the persons who really need to be in the room.
the right people.
Absolutely. But again, we love to meet, you know.
Well, I was just about to say that
that
has got to be a cultural issue. I remember working with a gentleman, Gilbert Callahan.
Yes.
And he was he was manager of operations. What he did was extremely important. And he had a standing meeting. This was what they did every Monday morning. 5 minutes, everybody did their roll call, what needed to be fixed, what happened last week, was that fixed, In 5 minutes, everything was done. And they were actually the most productive. They got the most work done. They had the least amount of errors, all because there was not this time being wasted.
That's right.
In the wrong spaces and the wrong areas. So everyone knew what their role was, and they only spoke about that which they really needed to do. And when there were action items, it didn't roll over into the next meeting. It became, was that done? Okay, let's move on. So that's a good point.
And finally, on that point, we need to reward our employees for good work. And sometimes we ought not to take our employees for granted. You know, again, as I started the conversation, we're human beings.
Just going,
we're human beings, and we're emotive beings, and we have feelings, and we would like to be recognized for great work. Yes, so don't take our employees for granted, and sometimes we do. You know, because Terry has been fantastic delivering, loyal employee, you hear something, Terry's having a challenge and you dismiss it. No, Terry she's okay, man, she can handle it. No, we have to listen, don't take them for granted. And when they do great stuff, reward them. And reward doesn't mean go and necessarily send them on a trip to Dubai, It doesn't necessarily mean that. But sometimes a thank you will boost the morale. And sometimes those small things, as a CEO, sometimes we don't pay attention to, and we end up getting the result that we don't want.
I want to put what you just said on a bullhorn. We have some questions coming in. I'm not so sure who it is, but thank you so very much for participating. The question is, now that we are working from home, a lot of employers are micromanaging their employees. What would you say to employers to approach situations like this? And I guess that is either to the employers or to the employees themselves. We touched on boundaries, but
we did earlier, and specifically to answer that question about, what would you say to employers to that approach? First of all, I can appreciate and understand why some employers would do that. Because it makes them now uncomfortable. So the pandemic has shifted, from this space that I control to this wider remote space that I have no idea. So this is what is important. From the employee's perspective and the employer's perspective, they need to understand what the challenge, what is the fear?
Right.
And you need to address that. So if the fear is, I'm concerned that you may not be delivering what we ask. You need to reassure and be credible by actually doing it.
Yes.
Yes? So this may take time.
That reassures.
Yes, this may take time. So it's important of the dialogue, because what are they afraid of? And I can put something for, but I don't know exactly what it would be.
Right.
But whatever it is, address it. And you only address it by doing. Yes? And over time, you're going to build credibility. And then you'll find out that over time, maybe the employer will ease back a little bit, giving them the comfort and the confidence that whatever the concerns are, they're able to address it. And from the employer side too, they have to be able to let go. Yes? they need to feel comfortable, but they need to be able to let go. And this whole element of trust, you have to trust, your employee. I mean, it's part of your family. You have to trust. But again, to be able to deliver on that, you have to perform, you have to be credible, and you have to show that whatever the concerns are, you're addressing it. So that is how I would answer that. But I do understand, though, that perspective, why the employer.
Well, we do have a follow-up, and the follow-up was, is micromanagement good or bad? Like, should leaders or some leaders in some industries micromanage? You know what?
Again, that's debatable. My perspective is that it's bad, and let me tell you why. A part of the way that I lead, I encourage an environment of learning and growth, and you need to make mistakes. So the only way you're gonna grow is by making mistakes and learning from them. If I micromanage you, you're not going to feel comfortable to think outside the box. And remember, if you always operate within the box, you are not going to grow. No. And I need you to grow, because if you grow, my organization grows as well.
Correct.
However, what is important is that you learn from your mistakes. Yes, so you make mistakes. Hopefully it's not catastrophic, but you need to be able to make mistakes. Yes. And,
within reason. Make your mistakes within reason.
And I did mention earlier that I will not buy a dog to bark and bark. So if I have to bark for you, meaning I'm micromanaging everything that you do, it means that I would have hired the wrong person for the job. So I have to ensure that I develop the skill sets required for the job. Yes, I have to invest in you as a person and for development. Yes, and I have to give you the confidence to make mistakes. I have to allow you to think and come up with your own solutions. The only way that I can do that is to allow you that space to do it.
And to act more as a guide.
As a coach.
And a coach, exactly.
Yes, as a coach.
I've had the privilege of meeting or of having bosses who have been great leaders, and they've known when to step in as a mentor.
That is correct.
And they've known when to step in as a coach.
Yes.
And they've known how to switch up their leadership styles, because at sometimes you need the servant leader, and another time you need a different kind of leader.
Yes.
And that is something very important.
And Terry, one thing I want to add, within all of that, as I said, if you recall, I mentioned that I don't like surprises.
Yes, especially the bad ones.
Especially the bad ones. So what I do, I put what I call levers of controls in place so that I can appreciate and understand what's happening without getting into the detail.
Oh, fantastic. We have a question from Renee Hales. How are you doing, Renee? What are some tips for someone just entering the workforce to stay motivated with focusing on self? Oftentimes, we tend to forget about ourselves, focusing so much in trying to meet the workplace expectations. So, I mean, and that's a great question for the person who is just coming in, who has a lot to prove.
Yes.
You know, you're usually on probation for 3 months or 6 months, depending on your position.
Yes.
And you have to spend a lot of time getting your colleagues to like you, trust you, and to build credibility.
Yes.
But that can be really bad to self.
Yes, but Renee, that's a very good question. But let's face it, when you just enter an organization, you're entering into a foreign space.
Yes.
Nobody knows you. You're there to deliver. You're there to prove yourself. So this is where you may have a little disequilibrium from day one. So you will have to roll up the sleeve, and you will have to work hard and smart, and you may have to sacrifice some self initially.
Yes.
Yes? Because remember, your objective is to get confirmed. You need to be confirmed in this job. Yes? So, and the organization need to see what your value, you know, what you can create. However, what is important is that over time, so having gotten your confirmation and you have now decided that this is the organization I want to be with, yes, you're going to continue to work smart and hard, but now you're going to start to, because you have to get back into equilibrium.
Absolutely.
And because if you're not in a state of disequilibrium, that doesn't work over time.
And you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're going to burn out, and then you won't be able to perform anyway after being confirmed.
Absolutely. So it's just a matter of time, yes, that you have to do that. And then you'll find that, you know, have to consciously, though, start to put the energy into not only in the work but in self, because sometimes you get so engulfed into the work that sometimes you forget self.
Yeah.
But don't fall into that trap, Renee.
Yeah, that I can definitely understand. I mean, as a newbie to so many different industries, you do sacrifice a lot because you do have a lot to prove and you want to earn your keep, you want to earn your stay.
Yes.
But as soon as you realize that, one, you have the support, you're actually very good at your job, and at that time you would have more or less figured out who your colleagues are, who your support groups are, who you can lean on. Then you kind of, and it doesn't mean that you slow down in terms of performing. No, that's not what we're saying.
Right. No.
But what we're saying is that you can now create more room for yourself where you can continue to do the things that you love.
Yes.
Or things that you might have stopped because you sacrificed, you can now take up again.
Absolutely.
Great question, great
Absolutely.
answer. Thank you, Marcus. So we have Andrew from IG. Hey, Andrew. He asks, how do you transition back to face-to-face interaction, having worked from home for an extended period of time? So we're looking at productivity where maybe I got accustomed to, producing in my pajamas, in my bedroom, and now face-to-face, the transition. How do you think that productivity and that balance, that life will happen?
Well,
or should happen?
Very good question. The first part of my answer to that question is that I do believe that the current situation, we will have a significant portion of that for the foreseeable future. So you will have, so I think the organizations now will be forced to look into face-to-face and the hybrid between home and face-to-face. Now, to answer the specific question is, the only difference, in my view, is you won't be in the pajamas, or you won't have your 2-year-old son or daughter beside you. But everything else will remain the same, because at the end of the day, you're working to deliver for the organization, and it doesn't matter where. You might, today's home, tomorrow maybe somewhere else. But the principle for delivering for an organization, those principles don't change. Yes, the environment will change, and that is where would say to Andrew, you have to be adaptable. Yes, because you don't have a fixed state all the time.
Correct. And as the world changes, we're clearly seeing, even if you're taken up, you're transplanted, you're sent to other countries, you're sent to other offices.
That is correct.
So that's a very good answer. Regardless of what changes around you, your principle, your focus, your objective, your targets, your performance have to still remain intact.
Those don't change.
Absolutely. Sabrina Morant from the Webinar Jam crew. Hey, sweetheart. What are some of the things that have caused you to become the leader you are? What are the drivers for the culture you influence? Because, as I said before, how you are speaking, the type of leadership style that you have, is not something that a lot of us in our lifetime here in Jamaica have experienced. And so, very good question. What have you either experienced or seen that has made you the type of leader you are?
That's a very, very, very good question. When I was at Harvard Business School, I was introduced to a professor who wrote a book, Discover Your True North.
Discover Your True North.
True North. Yeah, it's called, Your Authentic Leadership. And the professor was Professor Bill George. And when I was doing the course, I remembered that I felt as if he was always talking about me. And when I assessed the situation a little bit more, I recognized that one of the principles that he said was that your leadership style is a direct result of your life experience. Now, I have gone through the ups and downs and struggles to get to where I'm at. So I appreciate every single person that I interact with.
Yes, sir.
So it's not my respect for person. I will respect authority, but I do respect persons, individuals. And I recognize that growing up, I had to interact with a lot of persons who extend their helping hand, their caring hands to help. And I realized that going into the work world, the employees, they are just a subset of society. Yes, they are the same persons we are interacting outside. And because I valued that, I recognize that I connect very deeply with people. So sometimes I'll walk into, not titles, no, with people. So and my respect for person has nothing to do with their titles. It has to do with their value system.
Where's my offering plate?
With their
Did somebody get an offering
with
plate?
their value system. Yes? It's very difficult for me to interact with someone who lacks integrity. It doesn't matter who you are. It's extremely, as a matter of fact, I do not wish to share the same space with you if you lack integrity. If you are a poor performer, I'll work with you. Yes, because when I had my own struggles, someone worked with me. Yes, and this is where I'm at today. But what I connect with deeply is your personal values. You have to have integrity for me, and that is what drives me as a leader. Yes, so it doesn't matter who you are, and that's how and my mother, she passed away 3 weeks ago.
Condolences.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest part of my she taught me a lot of principles about my own personal values, and she inspired me a lot.
And influenced even your style.
And influenced my style. And I saw her struggles, and I said, being the CEO of companies and leading organizations, persons like my mother are part of my employee.
Your workforce.
My workforce. And I have to interact with them. I have to motivate them. And one of the things that I have always said, Terry, is that I remembered when my mother was laid off and the impact it had on the family. So organizations, I don't know if a lot of the organizations appreciate that the decisions they make or they take on employees, it doesn't stop within the boundaries of the organization. It goes to the wider cross-section of the society. So I always think about those things when I'm making my decisions on employees. And because I was encouraged through my time to be who I am today, I spent a lot of time coaching, mentoring, leading, guiding.
We appreciate,
that is it.
Listen,
that's the kind of style
we appreciate every single person who has influenced your leadership style, because it is extremely impressive, and I think we need to see more of this within the region. We have a question from Dwayne Dyer from Webinar Jam. He asks, is there a point when it's okay to be perceived as not being productive? And what should employees do when this perception is in disequilibrium with reality? Dwayne, I don't know if anybody wants to be perceived as not being productive.
I don't know, and my straight answer to that is no. You don't want ever to be perceived as not being productive at all, because it's a part. Your brand, and you have to develop your brand, and you do not want your brand ever to be linked with that word of not being productive.
Right, then you're no longer seen as an asset, no?
Absolutely. However, there are times though when you have to step back because you might be under pressure for your own mental health. Yes, you may have to step back. You may have to rethink. Reassess. Right. Now, if that is what Mr. Dwyer is being referred to as unproductive, I wouldn't call it unproductive, but yes, sometimes you have to do that. Yes.
It's situational.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if anyone notices that I asked the question, he looks at the monitor, and even afterwards, he's able to remember names, which is also a very good sign of a leader who takes the time to know your name. Just thought I would point that out to you if you never know before. We have a question from Marlene Lamont from Webinar Jam. Quite a lot of our folks on Webinar Jam, which means that they registered. What are the character traits you look for in an employee to determine that you will mentor that person for a leadership role? Good question. So we have a lot of persons who require a lot of help, want mentorship, but we know that there's some who are going to take what you're saying and they're going to apply it. So what are the character traits that you look for in an employee to know whether this is going to be a waste of time or this is somebody who's worth?
All right. That's a very good question. For you to be credible, you have to have the technical skill sets. So if I'm hiring you as an accountant or as a marketer, you need to bring that to the table. That doesn't make you a leader necessarily. It makes you a technocrat.
Correct.
Now, what am I going to look for now to see whether or not you can develop into positions of leadership is what I call now those leadership traits.
Yes.
So let's start. You have to have a passion for people, because you have to work with people. Yes? So you have to have a passion for people. you have to have very strong personal values.
Yes.
Because why I say that is because you are going to be faced with situations where you're going to have to pull on those values to,
Correct. Or opportunities you might have to decline.
That's my point.
Because, yeah, they totally conflict.
It totally conflict. And that is important. You have to, and that comes with the whole concept of integrity.
Yes.
Yes? So one of the questions that I always ask at an interview is, what are your personal values? And I will describe a situation to see, and I will ask you, what will you do in such a situation? Because I need to understand how the way you think. So I try to get into your mind to understand the way you think.
And now we know, just in case you're ever interviewed by Steele, that's one of the questions he's going to ask.
So your personal value is very important to that, because we can develop those.
Yes.
Yes. We can invest a lot of time behind those for you to become a good leader. And remember, leadership is about engaging people, getting the best out of people.
Right.
It's all about people, If you don't love
Always.
people, you can't lead, It's all about how do you get the best out of people. I've always said, I've never fired anyone in my life,
What?
Never. They fire themselves.
Hi, got you. There you. I heard a lot of people going, hey, okay. No, that's a very good way to wrap, and certainly a definite character trait, because you mentioned there's some things that can be trained, skill sets, but when it comes to having the right attitude and the right approach, those will always be character traits that we will always look out for. Steele, time has come upon us.
Oh, already?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
But I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the persons in the chat. Very good questions.
Very good questions.
Very good questions. But I'm absolutely sure that all of your invaluable insights have not fallen on deaf ears. I'm certain that everyone who is listening is either going to apply it as an employee or as an entrepreneur or as an employer in order to look at and assess productivity and balance, from a different perspective, not necessarily everything that other persons say it is, but what they can create in their space. So I thank you for taking the time. To the entrepreneur who happens to get him on a one-on-one, bring me along, please, because I would love to benefit from that conversation. Thank you guys for always participating. Remember what we said about our mentorship program. You cannot be eligible unless you won. Go to digicelbusiness.com. Make sure that you are registered for the Digicel Business Masterclass series, but also make sure that you apply. Fill in your application, submit it. You have until December 10. And don't forget, one of the other steps, you must be following the Digicel Business page on LinkedIn. So next week is our final episode. Oh my goodness. So please remember to tune in next week, Thursday at 6 p.m. If you haven't already registered, please do so. Who will be our last master? The great Usain Bolt, Digicel brand ambassador and the fastest man in the world, who is now a daddy. He will make a special appearance as we unlock the doors to his success using discipline and motivation. Remember to continue using the hashtag Digicel Masterclass, hashtag Digicel Business. See you next Thursday. Awesome conversation.
Thank you.